Hello, thank you for joining us for this Orefinders Resources webinar. My name is Keith Ben. I'm the Vice President of Exploration of Orefinders Resources. Before we kick off the webinar, as such, some forward-looking statements. This is the mineral exploration business that we are engaged in. It's inherently risky. All potential investors should be keenly aware of it. One other thing I'll point out explicitly here, I will be talking about some numbers in the course of this presentation, such as historical production from gold mines, resource estimates. All of these numbers presented herein are considered historical in nature by Orefinders. Orefinders exploration program is focused in the southern Abitibi Greenstone Belt. We have three main properties located in Ontario: the McGarry property, the Mirado property, and the Knight property. We won't be discussing Mirado here today. We'll be focusing on McGarry and Knight. And we'll use this simplified regional geological map just to point out the broad structural setting of these two exploration projects. McGarry is situated right on this main structure, or large scale structure, I should call it here, the Cadillac-Larder Lake Fault, world famous fault zone that is the locus for many gold deposits in the southern Abitibi Greenstone Belt, and that runs through the mining towns of Val-d'Or, Rouyn-Noranda, Larder Lake, Kirkland Lake, and probably continues down at least to Matachewan, which is roughly here where the Young-Davidson mine is located. So the McGarry property is right on that well mineralized structure. The Knight properties are not located on the Cadillac-Larder Lake Fault Zone. They're south of it and north of another major fault zone called or labeled as the Rideout Fault Zone here. And it seems that the Knight properties are probably situated within a rather structurally complex linkage zone between those two large regional scale east-west trending faults. And that's a good thing, to be in a structurally complex zone. So let's start talking first about the Knight Gold Project, which is the project that we are currently drilling. We began drilling around September 22nd at the historical Tiernite mine. That's our first drilling target zone. It's a mine that was exploited in the 1940s, it's reported to have produced roughly 31,000 ounces of gold at a grade of about 5 grams per ton. It's a classic shear zone hosted deposit, also intruded by cyanitic dikes, and we'll see that some of those cyanites are mineralized as well. Another exploration target is the Duggan West zone. This is a newly defined exploration target situated on a newly defined structural trend that we'll be discussing here. And we identify it as being a very similar structural setting to the mineralized Tiernite structure, and therefore it is a priority exploration target. The Porphyry Lake exploration target zone, labeled as 3 on the map, is situated in the same structural trend as Duggan West. It has a somewhat different geophysical signature. We'll see that it's associated with some very prominent induced polarization, or IP anomalies, that are suggestive of a large hydrothermal system that would be enriched in sulfide minerals and potentially also enriched in gold. Our exploration targeting was largely structural in nature. At the Tiernite mine, of course, it's a historical mine, so we know where the structure is, and we're testing down plunge and a long strike continuity of that known mineralized structural trend. We planned about 5,500 meters of drilling. We're about 4,500 meters into the drilling, and we've submitted over 2,000 samples for assay, and we have nearly 1,000 assays returned. We're expecting to finish off the drilling at Tiernite in the coming couple of weeks, and we will be moving on to the Duggan West and Porphyry Lake exploration target zones. Duggan West is situated on this newly identified structural trend. And we interpret that its structural setting is very similar to tiernite. That's based on interpretation of 3D geophysical models. And we have planned about 3,000 meters of drilling there. Porphyry Lake will be testing those induced polarization IP geophysical anomalies that indicate that there's a potential for that large hydrothermal system there. And we have about 1,400 meters of drilling planned there. Now let's look at some of the geophysical products and the attendant interpretations and the justification for our exploration targeting. I'll mention in passing that all of the map products and geophysical sections I'll show you in this brief presentation were generated for Orefinders recently by Mira Geosciences out of Montreal. Now, these two maps here represent two different data sets. The one on the left is topography. The one on right is magnetic intensity, as derived from a very high resolution aeromagnetic data set that covers all of our property. And based on these maps and other data sets, we've defined, well, we recognize, of course, the tiernite structural trend, which was known to exist, but we can follow it quite far to the south and at least a bit to the north in our data set. We have also defined this new structural trend I mentioned briefly before. We refer to it as the Duggan Porphyry Lake structural trend. It runs, or it includes, the Duggan exploration target that has been drilled in the past. That's what these small gray dots here are. Those are historical drill hole collars. You can see them also here at the tiernite deposit. And that trend we can follow to the north and also to the south, where it includes Porphyry Lake per se, the lake. And our exploration targets down there, our geophysical targets, are hosted within that structural trend or closely associated with it. The ovals on both of these diagrams that are labeled, in both of these maps that are labeled in the right-hand map, correspond to the three drilling targets. As I mentioned previously, over 5,000 meters of drilling at tiernite almost finished. We'll be moving on next to Porphyry Lake for logistical reasons, and then we'll be finishing up our phase 1 drilling program at Duggan West. Now, regarding that interpretation of this structural trend, and more specifically Duggan West as representing a structural setting very similar to tiernite, here's an illustration of that. This is these are sections through a 3D magnetic susceptibility inversion model. This is based on aeromagnetic data, very high resolution data. And this model suggests that the tiernite mineralized structure, which is drawn in here, and that corresponds to the historical stopes you can see, as well as to these assays associated with historical and recent drilling below the historical workings, which finish right about here. That structure is situated right on what would be the base of a very magnetic unit here, shown in the hot colors. And it separates it from a metavolcanic stratigraphy that has a different magnetic signature, much lower magnetic susceptibility, shown by these cooler colors. That model is confirmed by our measurements of magnetic susceptibility performed on diamond drill core. That's what this histogram that you see is here, associated with this drill hole. You can see the strongly magnetic ultramafic and mafic metavolcanic rocks here in the hanging wall of the mineralized structure, and very low magnetic susceptibility in the footwall. The recognition of this petrophysical or geophysical signature associated with the mineralized structure allows us then to look at this same inversion model for the rest of our properties and search out potential structures that have a similar signature. And at Duggan, we have found such a structure where this red zone here would correspond to a strongly magnetic metavolcanic package, similar to this one that we see at tiernite, with a more weakly magnetic package in the footwall, as we see here at Tiernite. We interpret that there is an eastward dipping structure, so dipping in the opposite sense to Tiernite, that we are going to drill. This is one of our planned drill holes that's shown here, that we will be drilling in late February and early March at the Duggan West project, or exploration target zone, if you will. I'll mention in passing that at a larger scale, without going into too much detail, the fact that we have a structure here, a parent structure that's dipping to the east on the western side of our properties, and this known structure dipping to the west on the eastern side of our properties, suggests that our properties are situated within a structurally complex zone that might be akin to a graben, with the rocks in between these two structures dropped downward. And these two structures may, well, they certainly at Tiernite are controlling the gold mineralization, and we expect to find something similar at Duggan. Now, what would we be finding there? We hope at Duggan something similar to what we have drilled recently at Tiernite. This photograph comes from this grade composite that was calculated here using a 2 gram per ton cutoff over 14 meters at about 4.2 grams per ton. This is what the rock looks like. Strongly hydrothermally altered metavolcanic rock with lots of chloritic and quartz carbonate veining in it and lots of disseminated pyrite in it. This particular sample gave 8.68 grams per ton. We also discovered in this drill hole, in the footwall to the mineralized structure, which is shown here in gray, associated with some cyanitic rocks, another mineralized intersection. And the rocks there look like this. This particular sample gave 2.25 grams per ton. Okay? The calculated grade composite is 6 meters at 2.6. And once again, we have very similar veining. The dark chlorite, you can see lighter colored quartz and carbonate within those same veins, and pyrite hosted within the veins and disseminated throughout the rock. This is quite exciting for us because it means we can expect to drill or to find in our drill holes mineralized rocks in the known mineralized structure and also in its footwall in a different rock type entirely. We also hope to be able to drill the same type of rocks and mineralization off at the Duggan West target. Now let's move to the south along the Duggan Porphyry Lake structural trend, which is shown here with the blue traces that we saw in a previous slide. And what we're looking at here, overlaying on the Google Earth image, are our horizontal sections through the newly modeled inherited IP data. And what you see here indicated in the hot colors are IP or chargeability highs that we are fairly confident are associated with concentrations of sulfide minerals, which are an indication, we think, of a hydrothermal system associated with the porphyritic intrusive rocks that gave the name to Porphyry Lake. And we have 5 holes designed to test these these chargeability highs. And we also have 3 other holes shown in gray here that are planned to test other types of geophysical targets that we think may be associated with a different type of mineralization yet. More typical of something known as that we call a Minto style mineralization that we think is associated with magmatic brecciapipes, which could also be part of this hydrothermal igneous intrusion associated system. We should be moving down there to start drilling this off sometime within the next couple of weeks. We're quite excited by this Porphyry Lake exploration target zone. There's been very little drilling done in this area, and these are very prominent IPs anomalies that are very shallow. We'll only need to drill 250 or 300 meter holes here to test these. We're looking forward to this very soon. Now, let's look at our McGarry property. We're not nearly as advanced with our exploration there. We're still in the planning stages for an upcoming drill campaign that we would hope to launch in Q2 of this year. Just to remind you, McGarry is situated right on the Cadillac Larder Lake Fault, labeled here, about 40 kilometers to the east of the world-class Kirkland Lake gold deposit. and only about 1,000 to 2,000 meters southwest of the world-class Cair Addison, and also the associated Chesterville deposit, which between 1938 and 1996 produced roughly 11 million ounces of gold, well documented. In its heyday, one of the biggest gold deposits and longest producing gold deposits in Canada. And that deposit is hosted within, as indicated by this oval, hosted within the Cadillac Larder Lake Fault Zone, which corresponds in this 1941 vintage map basically to these purplish rocks that you see here. Those same rocks are found on our McGarry property, which is within the red polygon overlain on this map. This, it's offset, the structure, the Cadillac Larder Lake structure is slightly offset from the structure at Cair Addison by a cross-cutting fault, but it is the same structure with very similar, dare I say, the same rock types. Our primary exploration target zones are likely to fall within these two red ovals that I've traced here. The McGarry Barber Zone, as we have dubbed it, and the Mill Zone, which is a historical name associated with this zone down here that's been recognized as mineralized for some time, but there hasn't been a whole lot of drilling there. I will point out that at McGarry proper, the McGarry Project proper, all of these complex traces that you see here on this map are actually projections to the surface of underground development that was carried out between roughly 1970 and 2011, and that led to the publication of this resource that we consider to be historical in nature. There has been quite a lot of exploration work done on the Cadillac Larder Lake structure on our properties, but there's still a fair amount of open ground to explore, including in this area here. And this target zone includes the Barber Larder open pit, small open pit, only operated for approximately a year, produced about 10,000 ounces of gold, very shallow, but it's a good indication that there is economic grade mineralization along this structure. And we're going to be exploring this much more thoroughly in the course of 2021. And we'll also be coming down to the Mill Zone, where you can see this same purplish geological unit here that we see up at the Cair Addison, Chesterville area, and here along the Cadillac Larder Lake Fault Zone. Here we're off of the main Cadillac Larder Lake Fault Zone, but we have the right rock types, and there are indications of strong shearing in here. This is an underexplored, high priority target that we will also be addressing. We are currently involved in developing and fine-tuning our drilling program, so stay tuned for that. We hope to, as I mentioned, to start drilling on the McGarry property sometime in Q2 or very shortly thereafter. Thank you for joining me on behalf of the Orefinders management team. Thank you very much for following Orefinders resources, and we hope that you will continue to follow our work, our progress in 2021 and well beyond. Thank you very much.